Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Good to see you again, and we've got one of our final matches that we ended up playing in the Treasure Cup. This was against Bonney. I was 7-0 at this point, and I will let you know throughout the video there's going to be a couple of sections that are just skipped just because my opponent and I took, a few minutes to think about like what our decision was going to be for that turn. We had a very, very close, very good game here, so this ended up being a lot more like wild than I thought it was going to be. Both my opponent and I drew the nuts. My opponent does use the Bonney on turn 1. He's going first. Does end up finding that Cavendish. So I know that on 6 Dawn, I'm going to have to remove the Cavendish off the board for sure. But he is just going to swing 6 with leader and then pass it back over to me. I'll have the 4 Dawn. I know that my trash isn't that great off of the Sindri, but I did have an Absalom in hand at the moment, so I felt pretty confident that just swinging 7 into leader, trashing the Absalom, and luckily getting another one into trash as well was very helpful. So I'll just play that though to get rid of his searcher, putting a couple cards to the bottom. And there are a couple of moments in this game where people questioned, why I made certain choices, and I'll get to those as they pop up. There are a few choices that I think were absolutely correct, and then there's like 1 or 2 that maybe were, I don't know. It felt like I was kind of gambling rather than maybe staying a little more consistent, but I still think that this match was so close that it kind of boiled down to I kind of had to take that gamble. Yeah, and it just works out that way. But my opponent is going to rest the 5 Dawn here, and in just a moment, I think he's just maybe considering another line, but is going to rest the 5 for the Cavendish, gets the 2 back and swings 6. I'll give him a 2K just because I do like staying a little higher on life in this matchup than maybe normal. I don't particularly want to get too low because that's when that 9-drop Zoro becomes pretty terrifying. They're bored if they start to see a lot of the not Cavendish, the why am I forgetting the name of it, the 6 cost Basil Hawkins. So I'm just like, I don't think I want to risk all that, but I get the perfect card down in this matchup on the perfect curve. So turn 3, we get Sakazuki down to KO the Cavendish. Both my opponent and I have basically had the best start that we can have to this game so far. He is going to swing 5. I'm going to give him a Borsellino here. Borsellino's nice in the later stages of the game, and that will become relevant in one of the turns that I'll bring up here in the near future. It was a decision, that ended up kind of changing a little bit, and I actually think I had, when I'm rewatching through this, I'm not only thinking about, was this the right play, but I'm also looking at, what chat is saying on here as I'm rewatching it, because there were a lot of people that questioned how I went about this decision right here. But I went 7 with Sakazuki, and my opponent is going to just go ahead and take this life going down to 2. I swing 5 with Absalom, and then I play Moria. So a lot of people were like, why would you swing with Absalom here? You now just gave him, an extra body to attack into. That's literally the reason. I don't want to take life. I know that at this stage in the game, my hand it didn't have a lot of counter. So I was working on, trying to get as much potential counter into my hand. So picking up the Hina is actually really great in this matchup, but it also felt kind of rough because I wanted to see more counter power to protect my board. And I was concerned, that my opponent is getting to the point of potentially seeing another 10 cost. But he is going to play out the Bonney here, and it does find another Basil Hawkins, so I think that kind of changes the trajectory of where my opponent was going with his turn. And now a 5 into the Absalom. I'm considering on whether I want to let it go, and I do. I was just thinking of, like, if I do counter out, he probably swings 7 into Sakazuki. So, and then I have to give two cards out of hand, and I didn't really want to do that. But having 5 on board, I know that card was going to be replaced anyways, so I had no problem whatsoever just letting it go. Sure, it would have gave me an extra swing, but in the grand scheme of things, I was not concerned too much about that as I was about, just making sure that I'm optimizing my hand size for the later stages of this game. And so I swing 9 into his Basil Hawkins. He has like 8 cards in hand at this point in the game. He does counter out with a 2K and a 1K. I'd love to see a Rouge being trashed. I'm super happy about that. I do swing 3 into the Bonney just to get it off the board. And I still have 10 Dawn, so I could just swing 5 with Hogback and, either get him to rest his Basil or potentially get a card out of hand. And, I don't need to dedicate any Dawn here. And now he puts his cards down because he's definitely thinking about this. If I'm swinging 5, I could potentially just completely load up Dawn and go into the Basil Hawkins. But I had another Moria at this stage in the game, and I'm just thinking of whether it's better for me to be swinging into Basil for 7 or going into Life for 7. If I'm not mistaken, I believe I go into Life right here, but it is still kind of questionable which one is correct, but I kind of wanted to put my opponent on a ticking time bomb. I was like, look, I don't want you to feel comfortable playing into like 10 cost and 8 cost. And off the Moria, I simply just put down a Perona. I was considering going for a Borsellino here. I actually, now that I have 2 Morias, I actually think that Borsellino was the correct play. But I was looking to get a Hody out of his hand, and it ended up working. I knew that my blockers were just potentially going to get rested anyways, but having 2 Morias means that more than likely, every time he uses Leader Effect, it's Moria getting rested, like 9 times out of 10. So I do think that in some way, shape, or form, it was a bit wasteful for me to not pick up Borsellino, because in later turns in this match, I think that the Borsellino would have done me more than the Perona ripping the Hody Jones from my opponent here, because I knew that I had already trashed quite a lot of my blockers and I wasn't getting them out. Now, one big mistake in my opinion that I just made was I think I should have countered that Hogback, but to be fair, as you'll see in the next few turns, I do have quite a lot of counterless cards in my hand. I end up unfortunately letting the Hogback go. I think that he would have swung into it one more time had I let it stay. But my opponent's deciding where to go with this Basil Hawkins. I have 4 in hand. I think that, in my opinion, my opponent goes 7 into my Sakazuki, if I remember correctly. Or no, this was 7 to life. Okay, so yeah, no, he definitely swung that out correctly. I was thinking if he went, because there was another turn that he went 7 into Sakazuki, that it just felt wrong. Like, it felt like if he had just chipped at life, it was probably better for him. But, yeah, the Doflamingo is excellent here. It's super annoying for me to have to deal with. He doesn't have any active Dawn, though, because no Rouge, no Cavendish on the board to get back any of that potentially, from the grave. And I know that I just want one of the Basil Hawkins gone, so I have options of either swinging 7, 9, or swing 5. He potentially rests it, and then I swing 11. I mean, optimally, best case scenario, he just counters, and then I swing 11. But, this is an incredible player. So he's definitely thinking it through, like, what are my options? What does he expect me to do with the rest of my turn? And if I'm not mistaken, I think he just blocks with the Basil Hawkins pretty quickly. He goes, yeah, all right. That seems pretty fair, because I'll probably end up losing one of these either way, and I just don't want to lose a card in hand as well. So now I'm going 11 into Basil. I arguably could have went and put him to 0 life here. I just don't like the idea of if he played 8 cost Kid with 2 Basils and potentially a Rosinante. So yeah, I wasn't emphatic about that idea, personally. But I play another Moria. And this was a point of contention for apparently a lot of people in chat. I'm not reading chat during these games because, one, sorry, but I feel like I know what's going on better than anyone that can't see my hand. So I'm not going to be reading and listening to people that don't know what's happening in my hand. And so I actually had a couple people that were like, oh, this is terrible play. I played Hogback and Brand New, but Brand New was going over the Sakazuki. And Brand New unfortunately whiffs here. You know, I just didn't have a lot of counter power. So unfortunately Brand New just, yeah, didn't get me what I was looking for. But I do end up picking up another 2k off of the Perona. I'm slowly adding like one piece of counter back to my hand per turn. And drawing into like some as well, but you'll see that I do have a little bit of counterless cards. I don't need the Sakazuki. I have 3 9k Morias on the board. I'm not sweating the position at all. So I personally just wanted to see counter. I was optimistic that Brand New might be able to find like a Borsalino or a Suru at this point in time. Unfortunately, I was just whiffing on it, but my opponent has got 1 life, 1 blocker, a 10 cost, you know, and I believe he swung 5 at life with the Bonney. And I think that, you know, I had this idea of like, is this swing harder than it needs to be? Like, is this concerning? The reason why I'm thinking about this is like, how much would he dedicate to attacking my rested Moria? You know, would he swing 11? Like, I'm fine with potentially losing 1. I'm not great about potentially losing 2. I also don't believe I had a 1k in my hand at the time, so I end up countering with Perona, the Perona that I just picked back up. And yeah, I mean, he's staring down quite a board with the Morias, but I mean, 8 cost Kid is fantastic. You know, it does honestly great for my opponent here. The 10 cost is, or the 10k is going into life. You know, he's realized that the Morias are too tall to really, you know, deal with. We're just going to leave them alone. And he is choosing to instead go the path of, you know, 8 cost Kid, play down another blocker with the Rosinante, passing it back over. So now 8 cost Kid is a magnet. He's got 2 blockers to protect it. I am now thinking about how much counter power I have in my hand, because I have like 6 cards in hand, right? 3 of which are dead, and you'll see those 3 here very shortly. But yeah, I know that I'm like, man, this is actually kind of a rough spot to be in. And I decide to actually swing 10 into the Kid, and he gives me the block. I was wondering if he would give me the counter or if he would just instantly block because I have leader effect. He rests the Moria because now my leader is more or less not really going to be quote-unquote useful in getting rid of Rosinante, but this was kind of the master plan, if you will. I end up going 3 for a Hina, playing this over the Hogback, and then another 3 for a Hina over the Brand New onto the Uses Captain Kid. I did the math in my head, and I realized that if I leave Kid on board, I lose to the swings the following turn. And if I remove it, then I can potentially draw the 1 counter that I need in order to survive. And I could have done this against Dofi, but my concern was if he double blockers after that, how do I go for game? So I decided to just say, you know what, Dofi's just, I'm taking a life, and then can I get out of the other 2 swings? So I used the Rosinante, removed the Dofi. I'm trying to goad my opponent into going for game right now. I have exactly 11k counter in hand. So I'm leaving my opponent the option. I'm also taking a bit of a gamble. I think that if I did bring back on one of those turns that I played a Brand New, my Borsalino, that card would have been super relevant at this point in the game, because my opponent would have thought if they're going for game, they have to rest that versus a Moria, which gives me an extra swing, which potentially removes a card off the board. So I think that that was where I kind of, in my opinion, sort of messed up. I could have done a little bit better, but I take the 10k swing. Even though I could have gotten out of it, he would have just hit me with like a double, triple, quadruple blocker or something that Bonney can do. And I didn't really want to deal with that. I was like, you know what? I'm just taking the gamble. Do I get enough counter to get out of 2 11K swings? My opponent swings 11 with the Basil Hawkins. I take a look at the hand. I did pick up the 1K counter I needed off the first life, so I decided to take the second. And now, you know, just going up, I'll get to 9, 10, 11, 12. And I get out of both 11K, or excuse me, the final 11K swing. It was an extremely close game. I thought this was a bit of a wild one. I do believe that putting Borsalino down was probably a better idea for me, but seeing Sakazuki in this matchup is fantastic on curve. Drawing into 3 Morias is pretty wild. It's pretty unrealistic, but I still think that we had great opportunities if I didn't have the Morias, because there were plenty of turns that I didn't have to play the 8 cost, that I could have just swung like 11 with Moria, 11 with leader, bring back Hogback, pick up a 2K or something. But I wanted to get tall. I wanted to see how it would go, and yeah, I think it panned out really well for me. This was one of the hardest games I played in the tournament, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.